Steve Arsenault, I know many of you know Steve's been around a lot of these events. He is with Axiom, our sponsor. We're going to talk about the customer experience side of loyalty, and I want to pick his brains as to how his crystal ball is looking as we move forward. So let me steal this mic here, hopefully without making too much noise. Here we go. Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Don't mind me. I'm going to sit over here so I can use the table.
I can move over. We don't need to be quite so distant.
Perfect. I like to refer to my notes so I don't forget to ask you some important questions I wanted to pick your brains on. So for those who don't know you, and Belinda introduced Axiom very briefly earlier, but could you give us a quick introduction of yourself and Axiom and sort of what you do, what your day job is?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me, although not a big thank you for having me follow Canty. That's never an easy act to follow, so that's a tough start. But I started my career, 1984, I took a one-year leave of absence from a doctoral program in econometrics at University of Chicago to go work at United Airlines, and I've not left the industry since. Just really enjoyed it. Started my career really on the GDS, PSS side. Did a lot of that work, and then kind of eventually wound up in loyalty. And within loyalty, a lot of that has been on the platform side. Started and ran the programs at Unisys, at IBS, worked with Loyalty Plus, LPS, did a little bit of work with some of the other companies. So, I've been coming to these events, I think, since, for many, many, many years. So at Axiom, I'm a travel industry strategist. It's a new role, and I work with both Belinda and Vicky, and also Chris Werner, who's here, who does new logo sales. And my job is really to support them, really give them kind of my industry insights, and to a certain extent work with the product team, kind of thinking about how do the products actually, what are the use cases for the travel industry? How are they different from retail? How are they different from, for instance, media tech and telco?
So, Steve, you and I have sat on a lot of these panels over the years at various events and talked the whole breadth of loyalty strategy. One of the topics that comes up again and again and again, it's a real common theme, and I think it's a common problem for all the program managers in the room is, augmenting your data. We all have our first party data. Dave just gave some insights, on Built. It's very new, so, a lot of the insights are particularly old. But we typically look at what our members are doing, what we can see. So we see we have, I'm going to make this up. We have a million members, and 10,000 of them have top status in our program and spend X amount or stay or fly X times a year. But how do we augment that view of the customer to actually really understand what else are they doing? The crude example I always like to use, you have Johnny and Jody, right? And Jody has United 1K status and spends $20,000 a year, and the airline hopefully looks after Johnny and all the rest of it. And then you have Jody who, from what they can see, spends, $8,000 a year, has, low to mid-tier status, clearly not as important. And, she feels treated that way. But Johnny hates United. Mm-hmm. He only flies them because the boss has a corporate contract. He actually likes to fly Southwest, loves them, spends $80,000 a year with them, absolutely loves them. And, in his own private enterprise that he's invested in ensures that the corporate contract with them is actually with Southwest. Jody, on the other hand, doesn't spend a dime anywhere else. Mm-hmm. 100% share of wallet, and she loves the airline. She thinks, she wants to, engrave a tattoo or something. Loyalty is really about behavior and attitude, not necessarily about spend. But if we can't get a fuller picture of the customer data, two-part question: can we, and how can we? But if we can't, what's the pitfall there for a program manager who's only looking myopically at their own first-party data?
Okay, a lot to unpack there. I think the first thing is, and David talked about this, is, what we want to do is incentivize behavior. In his case, it was very clear, I want to get basket size up. So the first thing you need to do to understand how you can incentivize behavior is to understand what's important. So if you want to try to get me to take an incremental trip, it is kind of the notion of what am I interested in. So we're able to help you augment that data with propensity data. So it can be as simple as, and I get grief from my team because our boss is an avid golfer and I'm not. And the example I always fall back on is, I don't golf, I'm a skier. Don't give me, a Palm Springs in the middle of winter golf offer. Make a Whistler at Christmas week offer for me to go skiing. That's an offer I'm going to take up. That's where you might be able to get that incremental spend. But the other thing in your example is, you've got these two people and, in one case, you really don't have any upside potential. So how do you understand that? So one of the bits of data augmentation that we're working with now is one of our partners, and we're able to get access to modeled credit card data. So we're able to start to see what that share of wallet is. And, that to me has a lot of different implications. I mean, the obvious one is, in your example, the person where I'm only getting, less than 100%, I'm getting 50% of their business, I can start to invest in that person. If I'm already getting 100% of your business, investments in you are going to help retain you, maybe. In your case, I think it's even more negative of I'm kind of stuck flying the airline, but at least I want to keep this person, vocally in my favor. But really, the investment should be going more towards some of these other people. The other thing is, just in that first conversation with Brian, you're talking about all of these status extensions. And I may be a little bit cynical about status extensions, possibly too many conversations with Mark Ross Smith early morning. But one of the obvious questions that I would be asking if I were a frequent flyer member or manager is, so you haven't flown me in the last 2 years. Should I extend your status? Well, it'd be real nice to know, are you just not flying? Is your job changed? Are you really health concerned? Or have you basically taken kind of this free pass? Are you basically saying, well, if United Airlines is going to extend my status for a year, why don't I go and fly Southwest and maybe I can get a companion pass? So if you've got that share of wallet data, now all of a sudden I can start sorting those people into, here are the ones who haven't flown. And I feel pretty good about extending your status. But here's this group that they're flying and they're flying somewhere else. I don't see any reason why I should extend your status. I think there's also, one of the things that, I'm talking to the product people about, kind of teasing this data out, is, one of the things that we're seeing in the industry recovery is kind of, restaurants recovered before hotels. Hotels recovered before airlines, and to a large extent, that's just what do people feel comfortable about. So again, with credit card spending, can I start to track people? Can I start to do some modeling and then some analysis of, David's starting to go out to restaurants again, so this is a good time to start thinking about hotel offers to them. And all of a sudden you drive to a drivable hotel and you stay there for a weekend, and now you start to feel good. And as your hotel spending starts to increase, maybe this is the time to make that big ticket airline offer, for that bucket list trip for you.
It's interesting. I mean, the status extension is a great example. I think about it because you do have people right along the continuum, right? In terms of you have some people that still aren't traveling because they have health concerns. Mm-hmm. You have some people not traveling because their job's changed. Now, in the first example, the person with health concerns, at some point they're no longer going to have health concerns. They're going to feel comfortable traveling again. You have to assume that there's an upside potential in the future. For the person whose job's changed, that could mean any number of things. It could mean they're out on their backside on unemployment. They're not going to be traveling anywhere. Right? Now, at the same time, you don't want to give that person a bad negative experience and say, well, while you're down, I'm going to trot on you, because you're going to get another job at some point. You were a road warrior in the past. Chances are you're going to be looking in that industry again. I'd like you to have fond memories of me when you come back in the future. So that can be a tricky one, right? Even though there's no immediate upside. But as you say, if you have a better understanding of the customer and you can see that well, so-and-so looks like maybe they've just got health concerns, but really they're spending 20 grand a year on my competitor now because they don't have to worry about requalifying, which is the crux of Mark Ross Smith's argument over the last 2 years. For those that know Mark, you'll probably have a chuckle at that. It's a very different picture. So my takeaway from everything you just said there is it's about understanding the customer, but you touched on something else here in terms of, okay, well, if you're going out to restaurants again, maybe you're going to be open to hotel offers at this point. Let's say you're able to augment the data and you get that fuller understanding of the customer and you see the opportunity there. How can you take that to the next level, or what would be the right strategy to approach, take that to the next level to be think about, well, how can I partner, with my partner organizations or programs, and I don't want to use the monetize, but incorporate partner revenue, earn or share into the mix. I mean, is that part of that discussion?
Yeah, that's a huge part of that discussion, and Belinda really touched upon that kind of lightly in the introduction, but one of the things we do is a clean room. And in a clean room, what we're able to do is take Party A's data, Party B's data, and put them together and start to understand, where the gaps are, where the overlaps are. So for a partner analysis, for instance, is one of the things that we can do, and it's to then help you determine who are the right partners. So you go in and you are Emirates Airlines and you take your data and you compare it against Four Seasons and you start to see, okay, that's a pretty good demographic match. A lot of people who are flying, especially premium cabin on Emirates, are also staying at Four Seasons or Ritz or some of these others. That's a really good, partner match. Start to understand what that match is. And so at that point, really able to find better partners and really start to understand who are the customers who are going between partners. And that really gives you that ability to, potentially the offer you can make to your partner is, we've got a lot of people in this similar demographic who have never stayed at Four Seasons. Emirates can make a nice offer to Four Seasons if they're the partner, and I can start bringing more partner revenue into my house, but I can also start bringing incremental customers to you. And that's all done, privacy compliant way. Nobody has to share data. We're kind of that independent person in the middle doing that analysis.
Those are one of my next questions. So, I mean, in terms of when you're looking at this, whether it be, the partner analysis, whether it be looking at the share of wallet analysis, is this at the cohort segment level, or, is this in the individual level? Can you, can Matt see, if Matt partners with Axiom, can Matt see that, when I flew to the office, I was supposed to fly on Delta, who we have a corporate contract with, but actually, I flew on United instead, and therefore there's a share of wallet leakage there, or a share of wallet opportunity, perhaps. Is it? Can you match this and gain the actionable insights at the individual level, or is it a cohort?
We do have it at the individual level. It is modeled data, and it is at the monthly spend level. So I can say what you've done is, $5,000 last month on United Airlines, and again, that 5,000 is modeled. It's not an exact number, but it basically says you're a pretty good United customer. I don't necessarily know what segments you flew. I don't know, and where you went. I don't even know what days of the week you were traveling. But again, there is the possibility of taking other types of credit card data and starting to get some location information on that. Kind of the idea of you bought a cup of coffee at JFK. Well, okay, you were either picking up somebody at JFK, which makes you an absolute saint, or you were flying out of JFK. So we do have a little bit, either way, we have some insight.
I don't think there's anybody in my life that I love that much. That's not true. I did pick up my wife. The last time we had the Lordy Summit in person before the pandemic was in New York, and I drove to JFK to pick up my wife, who came in after the summit. So that was not one of my most fun days. You touched on privacy. And sorry, just to go back to round up that other thing. I mean, even at that modeled level, I mean, that really is going to be able to help produce potential segments that you might want to send a targeted offer to, or, segment for a promotional opportunity or whatever. So I certainly see some actionable deliverables from there. in terms of privacy, I mean, privacy is a mess.
Right.
Obviously we've got GDPR. I mean, here in the States, we have CCPA in California. I mean, we have Canadian regulations. I mean, it is a mess. I was going to say, how do you approach it? But really, what's your advice to program managers about the best way to deal with this? Because it would be a nightmare to try to be aggregating some data and having a look at share of wallet and all these other things that we talked about to get a fuller understanding of the customer, whilst navigating, well, what can I share in one state but I can't share in another state or across a border?
I think that's another area where Acxiom can provide a lot of help. I think we were the first company in the country to have a chief privacy officer. We recently did an executive summit for some of our customers, and I met our chief privacy officer. And she's out there dealing with legislation. She's overseeing a worldwide team. So we really do have a deep understanding of what all of these rules are. And, we can be kind of your Sherpas in this situation. We can really guide you through that. And, I think one of the things that Acxiom has been really good about is that, we really are telling our customers, err on the side of not making mistakes. Like, this is the headline, this is the one bit of press you never ever want to get. So for instance, in the United States right now, I believe CCPA is the strictest of all of the standards. Other states are coming up with standards. We're monitoring them. But right now, my understanding is we are CCPA compliant everywhere in the United States. So we are taking, we take this privacy to a higher level than what's legally required.
Are you able to, just sort of as a way to wrap up, putting it all together, everything we've talked about, are you able to share, I mean, you might not be able to name client names, but are you able to sort of share some examples or case studies, where sort of, getting this more fuller view of the customer journey has enabled some interesting insights that sort of stand out to you?
We did quite a bit of work prior to my arrival there, early in the pandemic. We did quite a bit of work helping airlines and hotels understand who the travel-ready audiences were, being able to package those audiences and send them out. The other one that I think is really interesting, and I think it has a nice application to both airlines and hotels. We worked with a sports franchise recently. We're actually still working with them, and they were opening a new stadium. The stadium was in a fairly different location, so they were concerned that it would be a very different group of people buying both individual tickets and season tickets. And we did a look-alike analysis of people, who live closer to that new stadium now, and who are the people who look very, very much like the people who were buying season tickets previously. And those are the people to start making targeted offers to. And I'm not at liberty to give the return on investment, but it was an extremely high return on investment. We were able to help them build up that audience very, very quickly.
One of the themes we touched on today, you sort of mentioned about traveler-ready audiences in the beginning of the pandemic. One of the things we touched on when we sort of opened today, and I think it's going to permeate through all the sessions that day, is who is traveling today and how does that look different to before the pandemic? I mean, nobody. Again, the planes are full, airfares are high. Nobody is continuing to pretend that people aren't traveling. People are traveling, but there's you peel away the surface. Like, well, hang on a minute, who is traveling, and are they the same people that were traveling before? I know it's a moving feast, but are you able to share any insights that you have seen recently in terms that can put a bit more color around that discussion?
We're not tracking that specifically. I mean, anecdotally, what I'm seeing is when I'm on airplanes, it's an awful lot of families who are out there. What I think is the important takeaway for the loyalty programs is to really understand that, what we had pre-pandemic has changed forever, and where I think that we're likely heading, especially with people kind of moving away from working in offices, is that you're really going to see a very, very different distribution of elites. I think when nobody's in the office, it's real difficult to be that 150,000 mile a year road warrior, and what But you start to have this team that's all over the country, and now all of a sudden the head of that team decides, well, I want to see my team 4 times a year, 6 times a year. So now all of a sudden, maybe that 100,000 mile a year person, maybe they're not what you need to be chasing. Maybe it's that, you know, kind of traditional silver tier. And I think that's a huge challenge for the airlines. I mean, Brian was talking about upgrades. And my status has been downgraded. I still have status, and I showed up at the airport yesterday, and I was number 28 on the upgrade list. And I kind of comically sent a text to my wife saying, I think I'm not going to make it. By the time I was done with the text, I looked up at the board, and I was number 30. I had fallen 2 spots. So it is one of those of, you know, if you're trying to motivate people with upgrades, I might get one more upgrade, you know, between now and when I retire. That's not doing it. So you really do need some other incentives for that kind of, what is the value of being that silver tier member?
Well, I think the fact that upgrades used to be the be-all and end-all of elite status in the US, you know, and now they really are non-existent. And the airlines don't want to give away the seats. They've figured out it's better to monetize them, which was always the way.
Yeah.
Whoever was responsible for giving away unlimited free upgrades was a moron to start with. But that's another discussion for another day, and we know who some of those names are. But what really is the issue is the overall value proposition, isn't it? If upgrades aren't going to be the big key anymore, what is the value proposition to incentivize somebody to meet the hurdles that you lay in front of them to hold elite status? And the ultimate goal is we want maximum frequency from our customer base, but really what we really want is maximum share of wallet.
Right, right. I want, you know, if I were a loyalty manager, I would want my product to be number 1 on your list. I would want you going to my website, not to Expedia, and looking at me first, and what do I need to do to make that incentive? And I think that's just another one of those areas where we can help, is understanding customers at the individual level, because frankly, what might motivate you is probably very different from what might motivate me. So what are those kind of incentives? What are those types of awards? And, you know, for somebody who is a mid-level traveler and isn't really excited about travel, maybe it is partner rewards. So, you know, it is, I think, the time to really start thinking very, very broadly. I think it's just one of those, you know, the more you know about your customers today, the better off you are.
Steve, thank you. I think these topics are going to continue to come up throughout the day. On that note, thank you, Steve, for joining us. Thank you for your insights. We're going to take a quick break. You guys have been very attentive. I know there's some bladders that probably need dealing with. So bathrooms straight out the doors across the way.